Here are the stories shaping the world this morning and why they matter. As of Saturday, June 20th, renewed fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon is putting new strain on a fragile U.S.-Iran memorandum of understanding that was meant to create a 60-day diplomatic opening. The agreement was designed to give Washington and Tehran 2 months to reach a final deal aimed at ending their war and resolving disputes over Iran's nuclear program. It also called for military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon, to be immediately and permanently terminated. But that framework is already under pressure. Lebanon's civil defense reported that Israeli attacks on the Nabatea area killed at least 16 people and wounded 12 after a ceasefire took effect Friday afternoon. Israel said it was responding to Hezbollah firing more than 50 projectiles at Israeli forces in southern Lebanon overnight. A correspondent also reported that 4 Israeli soldiers were killed the previous day in a Hezbollah strike on an Israeli tank in southern Lebanon. The diplomatic fallout has moved quickly. The next U.S.-Iran negotiations in Switzerland were postponed after the Swiss Foreign Ministry said the talks would not proceed as planned. The White House said Vice President J.D. Vance delayed his Switzerland trip, and that negotiation plans had not been finalized. Shipping rules around Iranian ports and the Strait of Hormuz have also shifted in ways that could affect trade, energy markets, and everyday costs far beyond the region. The United States said it lifted its blockade on all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports and coastal areas as of Thursday. Iran first said commercial vessels seeking transit through the strait would need to apply to the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, with no fees for 60 days. Later, Iran said it had closed the Strait of Hormuz again, citing alleged U.S. breaches and ongoing Israeli attacks in Lebanon. For workers and families, this is not just diplomacy between capitals. Any disruption in the Strait of Hormuz can ripple through fuel prices, shipping schedules, and the cost of goods. In Lebanon, the immediate concern is more direct. Families in the south are again facing airstrikes, displacement, damaged homes, and the daily uncertainty of whether a ceasefire will hold. Mediation efforts are continuing. Qatar's prime minister has met with the Swiss foreign minister. Pakistan has been holding talks in Iran and Egypt. Jared Kushner has been in Bergenstock, with Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff expected to join him. An LSE Middle East politics professor said the framework remains fragile, and that Iran wants the United States to pressure Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to end the war in Lebanon. The constructive path is still visible, but narrow. Keep the diplomatic channel open, restore a credible ceasefire, protect civilian communities, and prevent maritime rules from becoming another trigger for escalation. In Brussels, NATO defense chiefs have confirmed plans for non-U.S. alliance members to strengthen their defense capabilities as Washington signals a reduced role in Europe. The meeting at NATO headquarters was described by Secretary General Mark Rutte as a landmark moment and part of a major transformation toward what he called NATO 3.0. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth welcomed the shift and said, "We're not going to allow freeloading anymore." He also said the United States will review troop deployments in Europe. That message is forcing European governments to confront a practical question: how much responsibility they are prepared to take for their own security, and how quickly they can build the industrial capacity, staffing, and coordination to do it. The talks also focused on Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky attended a meeting on military aid and said Ukraine urgently needs unmanned ground vehicles and long-range artillery ammunition. Germany, the Netherlands, and 8 other nations pledged financial support for a framework to buy U.S.-made weapons and equipment for Ukraine. Britain announced plans to provide air defense missiles, radars, and other assets. For Ukrainians living under Russian attack, air defense is not an abstract military category. It can determine whether children can sleep through the night, whether hospitals can keep operating, and whether power workers can repair damaged grids without facing another wave of strikes. Long-range artillery ammunition and unmanned ground vehicles also matter to Ukrainian soldiers trying to defend positions while limiting exposure on the battlefield. For European households, the NATO shift may bring budget debates at home. Higher defense spending can mean new jobs in manufacturing, logistics, engineering, and cyber defense, but it can also compete with spending on housing, healthcare, schools, and climate resilience. The challenge for governments will be to build security without treating social needs as optional. The broader message from Brussels is clear. Europe is being asked to do more, not only for Ukraine, but for its own defense. The hopeful part is that coordinated investment can reduce duplication, strengthen deterrence, and give democratic governments more control over their own security choices. Poland has revoked its highest state honor from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, opening a painful dispute between two countries that have also been close wartime allies. The Polish president revoked the Order of the White Eagle, which Zelensky received in 2023 after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The decision came after Kyiv named a Ukrainian military unit after the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, known as the UPA. For Poland, the UPA name carries deep historical trauma. Between 1943 and 1945, the UPA was involved in the Volhynia massacres of Polish civilians. Warsaw says up to 100,000 people were killed and classifies the massacres as genocide. Ukraine acknowledges the atrocities, but generally describes the violence as part of a broader wartime conflict. The Polish president said the decision was not directed against the Ukrainian people and did not change Poland's strategic security policy or support for Ukraine. Ukrainian officials condemned the move as unjustified and contemptuous toward the Ukrainian state and said the tensions benefit Moscow. The timing is sensitive. The dispute comes just days before a major Ukraine reconstruction conference in Gdansk, where governments, investors, and institutions are expected to discuss rebuilding homes, infrastructure, energy systems, and local economies damaged by Russia's war. For ordinary Ukrainians and Poles, the stakes are both emotional and practical. Millions of Ukrainians have passed through or settled in Poland since the invasion began. Polish families, schools, municipalities, and aid groups have helped absorb that humanitarian shock. Ukrainian families have relied on that support while also trying to preserve dignity, memory, and national identity during wartime. This is the difficult terrain of allied politics. Countries can share a strategic interest and still carry unresolved historical wounds. The constructive response will be honest historical reckoning without weakening the support that civilians and frontline communities still need. Poland says its security policy remains unchanged. Ukraine says unity is essential. Both points matter. In Tokyo, a fire at an elementary school sent 11 people, including 8 children, to hospital after smoke was reported near a 4th-floor music room. The fire broke out shortly before 11 a.m., Friday at an elementary school in Tokyo's Star Ward. Police and fire authorities said about 350 students and teachers were at the school when the fire started. Hundreds were evacuated. Some children climbed out of upper-floor windows with help from adults as the evacuation unfolded. Authorities said 11 people were hospitalized, including 8 children. One child broke an arm during the evacuation. Another child and a teacher were also badly hurt. About 75 fire engines and other emergency vehicles were mobilized, and firefighters brought the blaze under control after about 3 hours. Officials said everyone was evacuated. For parents, teachers, and students, this is the kind of emergency that turns a normal school day into a lasting memory. Even when casualties are limited, children may be left with fear and confusion, and staff may face difficult questions about evacuation routes, alarms, smoke control, and emergency training. The response also shows the value of preparation and public services. Teachers and adults helped children escape. Fire crews arrived in large numbers. Authorities accounted for everyone. The next step will be the investigation: where the fire began, how smoke spread, and whether safety systems worked as intended. School safety is often invisible when everything goes well. Incidents like this make it visible again. Families will want reassurance not only that this fire is explained, but that lessons are applied quickly in classrooms across the city. Myanmar's detained pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi has turned 81, with her family and supporters renewing calls for her unconditional release. She has been detained since the 2021 military coup. The military-backed government says she is under house arrest, but her location has not been disclosed. She was convicted of corruption and other charges in a trial held under military rule. Her son, Kim Aris, who lives in Britain, said he does not know where she is or whether she is well. The government announced in April that she had been moved to house arrest, but without independent access, her condition remains unclear. Supporters are especially concerned about her age and health and about the broader pattern of repression that has followed the coup. The military-backed government was inaugurated after an election held between December and January. Western countries and the United Nations have questioned the legitimacy of that vote because pro-democracy candidates were excluded. Aung San Suu Kyi remains a complicated global figure, admired by many for her long resistance to military rule and criticized by many others for her record while in government, especially on the treatment of the Rohingya. But the immediate human rights issue is straightforward. An elderly political detainee is being held without transparent access to family, lawyers, or independent observers. For people inside Myanmar, her detention is part of a much larger crisis. Families have been separated by arrests, fighting, displacement, and economic hardship. Civil servants, teachers, health workers, journalists, and local organizers have faced enormous pressure since the coup. Many communities are trying to survive amid violence while still keeping schools, clinics, and informal support networks alive. The call for her release is also a call for basic political space, the right to organize, to vote in credible elections, to speak without fear, and to know where detained loved ones are being held. International pressure has not yet produced a democratic transition, but consistent attention still matters, especially for prisoners whose visibility can affect their safety. China says one of its ships has completed a 3-day environmental survey east of Taiwan, the latest in a series of maritime activities that Beijing says assert jurisdiction over the area. China's Ministry of Natural Resources said the survey lasted 3 days through Thursday and was intended to understand ecological conditions in waters Beijing describes as under Chinese jurisdiction. The announcement follows repeated Chinese activity in the waters since early this month, including patrols by Coast Guard and Transport Ministry vessels. Beijing has said some of its recent activity was a response to a decision by Japan and the Philippines to negotiate a maritime boundary in an area including the waters. The ministry's latest survey announcement did not refer to that Japan-Philippines boundary issue. Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party-led administration criticized China's maritime activities as illegal. Taiwan rejects Beijing's jurisdictional claims, while China continues to claim Taiwan as part of its territory. These disputes can sound technical, but they matter to people whose livelihoods depend on the sea. Fishers, port workers, shipping crews, and coastal communities. Environmental surveys, Coast Guard patrols, and boundary negotiations can shape who is allowed to operate where, which authorities issue permits, and how quickly a routine encounter can become a security incident. There is also an environmental dimension. If governments are going to study marine ecosystems, the public interest is best served when data is transparent, science is shared, and surveys are not used to heighten pressure in disputed waters. Healthy seas are a shared need in a region that depends heavily on fisheries, shipping, and coastal resilience. The risk is that repeated patrols and competing legal claims create more chances for miscalculation. The constructive path is practical communication, clear maritime protocols, avoidance of dangerous maneuvers, and space for scientific work that does not become a cover for coercion. A new report is focusing attention on Anatol Kotau, a former senior Belarusian official whose career reflects the political rupture that followed Belarus's disputed 2020 presidential election. Kotau served as a senior official in the Belarusian government and later became Secretary General of the Belarusian Olympic Committee. He worked directly under Alexander Lukashenko, described as Europe's longest-serving autocrat. Kotau also helped oversee major sporting events, including the 2019 European Games in Minsk. The report says everything changed after the disputed 2020 presidential election. Hundreds of thousands of Belarusians took to the streets calling for an end to Lukashenko's decades-long rule. The Belarusian government responded with a sweeping and brutal crackdown. That crackdown reshaped daily life for many Belarusians. Protesters were detained. Independent journalists came under pressure. Workers who joined strikes or spoke publicly risked losing jobs. Families faced the choice of staying silent, joining the opposition, or leaving the country. Many Belarusians who wanted ordinary democratic rights, fair elections, accountable courts, free media, and the ability to protest peacefully found themselves treated as enemies of the state. Kotau's story matters because authoritarian systems are not held together only by one leader. They rely on officials, institutions, security services, courts, state media, and public organizations that decide whether to enforce repression or resist it. When insiders break with that system, they can help document how power works from within. When they stay loyal, they can help normalize abuses. Belarus remains closely aligned with Russia, and the legacy of 2020 continues to shape the country's politics and its role in the region. But the mass protests also showed something enduring. A large share of Belarusian society wanted a different future, and many still do. The democratic movement has been forced into exile, prison, or silence in many cases, but it has not disappeared. Follow for a daily world brief. Sources are linked in the description. That's the world as Minerva saw it.